So, me hearties, listen carefully. I've got a tale to tell ya. A seafaring tale, but also a whale of a tale. So keep a weather eye and listen carefully, as you'll find out about the most precious commodity. No, I'm not talking about whale bones, mind ya, for that's for the scrimshaw. Make no bones about it, this whale of a tale. Now don't start to blubber about it, but this is a precious commodity, valuable for its multiple purposes. What it's called is whale oil. Whale oil by the barrel after barrel, containing anywhere from 220 to 225 gallons apiece. Folks would light their living room lamps instead of using kerosene, which hadn't been discovered yet. Why? Because before Drake's Folly in Pennsylvania determined that this stuff called oil, or petroleum as we know it today, would burn better and lubricate better than whale oil. Whale oil was the main choice for illuminating things. Whale oil came from the melted blubber, the fat of the whale. The goods were also alright for doing stuff like polishing things and taking the blubber and making them into candles. A little more illuminating information there for ya. But that rascal Ralph Waldo Emerson once said the best thing was to hug a cask of whale oil, for it were worth more than cash money to lots of people. It went up in price like any commodity might. Whaling gave rise to a mighty industry in search of this creature that would provide the commodity. Vast numbers of folks were employed on the whaling ships, where the whale would be brought in, cut up into little slices and pieces, and melted down. After the whale had been chopped up into mighty fine pieces of blubber. After the whale had been chopped up into mighty fine pieces of blubber. Strips of blubber cut up like this from a pilot whale were transferred into mighty big iron pots, cask-like. They're called tripods. The tripods boiled up the blubber, rendering it down and melting it into whale oil. The smaller cut pieces of blubber like this were nicknamed Bible leaves. They cooked and burned faster, and pretty soon the bubbling pot of blubber, bubbling blubber mateys, would melt down into whale oil. After boiling enough, the oil was put into a wheat and copper pot and then transferred into the barrels, of which Ralph Waldo Emerson so eminently spoke. Like so much in life, it all came down to money, whether you are a poet like Emerson or not. This here is another valuable whale commodity, looking like palm fronds. Rather large palm fronds. This was called Baleen. At 6 cents a pound, Baleen didn't bring much money. Whale oil was far more valuable. Ah, but leave it to the women's fashion industry to make the Baleen go skyrocketing up in value. Women wanted to be Spartan hoop skirts, and their corsets to tighten their midsections required the use of the Baleen as stays. Slightly different fashion notions from those of today, don't you think? A mighty sturdy material Baleen was, and good for all kinds of utility purposes. Umbrellas, shoehorns, canes, fishing rods, buggy whips, cart springs, and even carriage wheels. Flexible and durable, the Baleen skyrocketed in price to $6 a pound, rivaling whale oil in value. Pretty soon it was the Baleen that was the gold mine of the whale, and carcasses full of blubber were often discarded and left to rot out at sea. Whaling ships were a sight to be seen. And whaling was a bit of a dangerous, if not adventurous, if not even sporty kind of business. As they'd see the horn of the whale spouting, they'd cry up from the crow's nest, "There she blows." And down would go the whaling boats with their harpoons to skewer the whales and haul them into the ship to cut them up for blubber. Or later get the Baleen. Over 100,000 Americans a year would leave the country in the mid-1800s to go and become whalers, join a whaling crew. And it might even be that folks of mixed race be included in a lot. "'Twas a rough and hearty life. Some of the whalers might be boys as young as about 12 years old to try to seek their fortunes in this new opportunity for employment. After 4 years, a green hand like this lad be paid $30, but unfortunately he'd only keep 14% after the ship charged him back for supplies and refitting and tools and equipment, repairs and maintenance. Oftentimes a boy like this one, hey bio, would end up owing money to the captain and the owners. Harpooners did a mite better, earning $67 for their 4-year stint, minus deduction. Didn't look like the grub was too good, does it? Food would often be filled with dirt and cockroaches. Aye, but a man's got to eat, you know, keep his strength up. Don't you think? Fresh fish would be had on occasion, obviously. Little shark. No doubt the first mate ate better than the crew and netted himself $264 for the voyage. Now the captain of a proud vessel such as this one, the Sunbeam, would take home after his 4 years a tidy sum of $380. Up in the rigging in the afternoon, swabbing the deck and sharpening harpoons.
Had a really great time, thanks. He was on camera. We're not ready yet. We're not ready yet.
This here is a smaller vessel known as a bark, not as in what dogs do. During the height of whaling as an industry, the fleets across the globe boasted 735 different vessels. But several factors had hearkened of the whaling industry, the first being the discovery of ground-based petroleum in Pennsylvania in 1856. The second being an Arctic disaster, global cooling as it were, in 1871, freezing up hundreds of the vessels. The second reason was not demon rum, but global cooling. The second reason was not demon rum, but global cooling. As in 1871, 33 whalers were trapped in Arctic ice. 12 more such vessels were trapped and abandoned in 1876, putting a big dent in the number of seafaring vessels available. In 1861 through 1865, the American Civil War. In 1861 through 1865, the American Civil War took away more vessels from the fleet. The truly fashion-minded woman have to be looking mighty Spartan in public, now wouldn't she? With all that Baleen. By the way, this is called a scrimshaw. Carved whalebone. In 1846, the American fleet boasted 735 different whalers. In 1846, the American fleet boasted 735 separate whaling ships. The whaling grounds covered a mighty expanse all the way down from the coast of Mexico into Upper California, moving up to Vancouver in Canada, up into the Aleutians, Bristol Bay, down the Curly and Sakhalin Islands, across the Pacific, off the coast of Japan. The vast and wide Pacific Ocean provided vast and fertile hunting grounds, as did the Atlantic, for these noble creatures. Hawaii itself became a vast and major whaling point of considerable economic advantage to the Japanese, the Americans, the British, and others who eyeballed these precious islands for their economic resources and capabilities. But the biggest cause of the demise in the whaling industry was not petroleum, or the Civil War, or global cooling and the Arctic freeze. The biggest cause, the demise of the creature itself, was vast. It's estimated that in less than 40 years, between 1835 and 1872, the American fleet alone was responsible for the destruction of just under 300,000 whales. In a few short decades, things went from "thar she blows" to "thar she goes." But people needed their cookie cutters and pie makers, and their art, and their fashions, and their jobs, and their jobs, their family heirlooms, their adventures and experiences.
A puppy.
But mostly, their blubber. Their blubber. The science of cutting up a whale maximized profit. Different whales require different kinds of cutting. So the story of whaling ultimately comes down to the same old sort of a tune. The story of man's need and the story of man's greed. And the story of man's greed. But maybe today things are changing, the mindset and the attitude of things, at least here in the States. Maybe we've changed from harpooning whales. This here is an E. Pierce darting gun. Little gunpowder adds a bit of pow to the harpoon's speed and lethality. From harpooning whales. Or even shooting whales with a gun, to shooting whales with a camera.
Hey Dad, whales are cool. Can I have a t-shirt?
Sure, son, we'll get Mom a handbag. Or how about a whale tea towel? Or some whale sculpture. Say, I'll take two at only $75,000 a piece. That's a bargain. So maybe, just maybe, to end this tale of the whale, we're just better off thinking about whales as art and history and a living species to be protected and cared for instead of killed as a commodity. Of course, not all cultures, Japan in particular, see it that way.